Hey friends, you're watching BrainStorm Acres. I'm Henry.
And I'm Irene.
It was hot today.
It was. Now, not as hot as it was down south. Last time I checked, it was like, I don't know, 117 down in one of the towns. And I was like, oh yeah, okay.
Oh, it was 98 degrees in the kitchen.
Yeah, it's right now it's still 86, so yeah. Outside, yeah.
I had to do a little cooking today, so the kitchen's a bit warmer.
Yeah.
Well, we want to talk to you about what living off-grid really means. For those of you who don't know, we live about 6.5 miles from the nearest power pole. We live, about two.
That's as the bird flies, not as a road exists.
It's probably 9 miles worth of poles and wire, which is, the last quote I had was $1.8 million to go from the power pole to our place.
Petty cash.
Yeah, easy, no problem. Well, in any case, that's one piece of living off-grid. The other piece is, since there's no power lines, that means there's no phone lines. No phone lines mean there's no fiber optic lines, meaning that you have to live by cell phone and satellite internet and solar power and generator power and wind power. It's a whole lot of stuff. And a lot of things could go wrong. But we had a real interesting experience this week. We spent the better part of 2 days having discussions between our doctor, a medical equipment provider, our doctor, more people at the medical equipment provider, more conversations with the doctor, more conversations with the office staff, more conversations with the medical equipment provider again. And, well, this actually started in February.
Yeah. Back in February, we did a sleep study. Henry and I both did it because we wanted to see if some of our sleep problems had to do with sleep apnea or something else like that, or whether it was just, being old and crinkly. And
lucky you.
Right. Part of it's old and crinkly too. But it turned out I should have, a BiPAP or a CPAP machine at night. And the doctor took a look at the sleep study. And the nice thing is, you don't have to go into an office for this stuff anymore. This is the do-it-at-home kit, basically, that does everything with Wi-Fi, and then every morning you upload the information to the doctor's office. It's way cool. None of this go sleep someplace else thing, Because I always thought to myself, there's a lot of people who really can't sleep away from home. Now, we're experienced with that because we travel enough. But that would affect your sleep study. That could very well screw it up completely.
A lot of times in Flagstaff they require you to stay over like 3 nights. So it's a pretty lengthy study.
Yeah. So this is one of the you can do at home, and you just wear something, and it's not a big deal. It was just a bracelet, as I recall, like a watch, like a smart watch sort of thing. So but they decided I should have a BiPAP machine. And then they said, okay, they contacted the company contacted us, said, yeah, we'll do it, no problem, we'll get back to you. The thing you want is out of stock right now, we should have it in a week or 2 max.
And then nothing happened.
Right. But it was right in the middle of a bunch of stuff for us. Henry was having health issues with his knees, and we had some car problems, and we had an event to go to, and there was just a lot happening, so it sort of fell off the radar. And
to be fair, I really expected them to contact us as soon as that equipment was in, because I understand that things can be back ordered, and we were told it was back ordered. It was supposed to be 4 weeks, so 4 weeks from the end of February is the end of March. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff going on.
Yeah, so there was just so much going on, and at the time my allergies were not particularly bad, because my allergies always make it worse. And things were going pretty well. I had gotten a new HEPA filter that we use in the bedroom at night, so that was helping. And it was doing pretty well. And then it started to get worse again this summer as it gets hot and dusty. And lately we've had, in the mornings, this smoke.
A lot of smoke.
laid in from the wildfires. And some of it's from California, some of it's from Arizona.
Some of it's from Nevada, believe it or not.
Right, and right now a lot of the dust in Arizona is actually from New Mexico because we've got some reverse winds that are coming from the east instead of, so the place is a mess. So if you have any kind of breathing issues, ugh. So I said, it sort of fell off the radar. I need to see what's going on here.
So 3 months after we actually expected the thing to come in, Irene called.
Right, and I called the little lady at our doctor's office and said, "Hey, it's me. Remember this stuff?" And she said, "Yeah, you have it, right?" I'm like, "No." And she's like, "Oh." So I said, we got to get somebody. I kick real well. So she said she'd kick them in the behind for us, and that they're like, "Okay, yeah." So they called me pretty quick because they had quote unquote dropped the ball. Now, when you look at companies that you do business, it's always nice to look at the ratings that they get from people.
Well, the ratings were not real encouraging.
like 1.7 out of 5 possible stars. Now the people who actually do the fitting of the equipment and any kind of respiratory help that you need, they get great reviews. But the other people, and the billing, so it's like, okay, so they call and,
"Oh, we can't sell it to you. We're not going to sell it to you."
Right, because you're off grid.
Yeah.
You don't have APS, and I'm like, why would I want APS? They lose power more often than I do, by a long shot. And last year, year before last, they had no power in town for a week because they had a major transmission line problem, and we were just fine. The only problem we had was we had to go down south to go get gasoline because none of the gas stations in town had emergency backups.
Yeah, so that's not an off-grid problem. That's an in-town, on-grid problem.
Yeah, they lose power all the time because I remember the guy who helped us with some of the masonry and stuff around here complaining he couldn't watch his football game, and I'm like, you could read a book. He didn't think that was funny.
Not a chance. So Irene was told, "No, we're not going to sell it to you." So I said, "Yeah, that doesn't make sense. I'm going to call." And
I told the woman I was talking to, I'm like, "Listen, I am sitting at my desk in front of a computer and a printer on a cell phone that I charge every night. I have Starlink, for my computer access. I'm looking at the air conditioner that's up on the wall. It's cool enough that I don't need it right now." Said, "But what? No, we just won't." And I'm like, "This is, what?" So I told Henry and I said, "See what you can do." So he called them and he got some rude mothers that were just ignorant, etc., etc. And they kept bumping it up. Father, I'll send you to my manager. And the first time he talks to this person, the guy's totally rude and obnoxious. He said, "Well, I need to have you talk to my manager." Henry's like, "Well, when will the manager be in?" "Well, he's at lunch right now." "Okay, when will he be back in from lunch?" "In 2 or 3 hours." "What manager gets to take 2 or 3 hours off for lunch?"
So I said, "Oh, so he's going to take 2 or 3 hours for lunch?" And she said, "He's a manager. He can do whatever he wants." I've been in business a long, long time, and let me tell you, if you're a manager and you abuse lunch for 2 or 3 hours, you're not going to be employed for very long because that's not the way business works.
Seriously.
So I said, "Okay, well, let me leave a message for him to call. As soon as he comes in, I want a call." And she said, yeah, we'll do that. And whenever he gets in and he gets time, he'll call you. I said, "Make sure when he comes in, he calls me right away. Because my next stop is to the regional manager. And no one ever wants to have a regional manager called because they're having problems."
Mm-hmm.
So I got a call back 15 minutes later.
Magic.
And the guy was actually pretty pleasant. He was pretty polite. And he said, "Well, we just have a policy. We won't sell to anybody who isn't connected to the Arizona Public Service." That's the electric company.
Right, and there's plenty of people out here who have CPAPs and all kinds of other stuff. We see the trucks come out here to deliver oxygen and all kinds of other stuff, and so we know people are getting services out here.
So I went through the same litany with him, and I told him, "My wife has a computer and she has a printer on her desk. There's an air conditioner in the room. We have fans. We have Starlink connection. I said, we have more power than what we can actually normally use. I said, right now we're running a freeze dryer, and that takes 1.4 kilowatts. So I just make sure I don't run that at night if I need to. So he said, no, we're not going to sell it to you. So I contacted
the doctor's office and said,
hello.
Okay. They say they won't let us have one because we're off grid. And they went, that's BS. A whole bunch of our customers are off grid and have CPAPs and BiPAPs.
And I was told, oh, well, you were told this in March.
We were not told anything in March. Whoever said that they called us did not call because there was no record of a phone call. There, we have cell phone service through Verizon. Not my favorite place in the world, but it does show every phone call I get. It's not like I could have missed anything.
No.
Nothing. No, they just decided they weren't going to service, and nobody had the wherewithal to, I was thinking something else, to call and explain to us that they were not going to give us anything. So we've been waiting for all these months thinking, well, we got busy and this and that and the other thing, and we must have just somehow fallen between the cracks. Well, no, they're not going to get us anything.
So I contacted the doctor and said, actually doctor's office, and said, look, they've said absolutely they're not going to support us. We have to go to somebody else. And I said, I know there's one other company in Flagstaff that will possibly sell equipment.
Right.
Because the third company won't.
Right.
So, a little while later, I get a message from the doctor saying, okay, here's the number you call. Either talk to this person or that person. They're going to sell you a machine.
Mm-hmm.
So, we called. I actually called and put them on speakerphone with Irene because I didn't want to keep on going back and forth.
Right.
And the woman was very nice. Same woman who said, no, we're not going to sell it to you.
Right.
Was very nice, and she said, oh yes, we're prepared to supply the equipment to you.
Mm-hmm.
And
magic. And you'll get a phone call pretty quickly from the scheduler. So it had to have been less than an hour later, and I got a call from the scheduler, Thomas, and he was very nice, and he offered me a couple of different time frames, and I scheduled for Friday. But then Henry had gone to town, and when Henry came home, he said the part that I need for a car, we had one part that was missing off our Range Rover that we've been waiting for weeks. And it runs, but it'll run better with the new part. So he goes, I have to be at the shop
place on Friday
morning at 8:30 in the morning, and I'm like, I have a 9 o'clock appointment at Flag. So I called Thomas back and I said, is there any way we can switch it to Thursday? And he's like, yeah, I still got these times. And I'm like, okay, we'll take the 9 o'clock in the morning on Thursday. And we drove up there. They were really nice.
20 minutes later, we walked out with the equipment.
Yeah, well, Thomas is super competent, and actually he has a super good reputation. If you check the little stars and stuff like that, he's one of the people that everybody loves. So, and he just made you feel comfortable. Rufus was entranced by the whole thing, because he had to go in with us. But yeah, so that's the new adventure. But it was just, I was sitting there going, this was coming out of a weird discrimination. I cannot get a debit card, not a credit card, a debit card with one of the major financial institutions in the United States because we don't have home mail delivery.
Right. So that's part of living off grid.
And I remember I had gone around in a circle for like 2 years. And I kept calling and I kept calling. I kept getting people in the Philippines. I'm sorry. I don't care how good they are. They have no idea what's going on in the United States. And this one time, I had managed to get somebody in the United States, and I said, look, nobody in our part of Arizona has home mail delivery. Nobody. Not even the people who live downtown have home mail delivery. You have to go to the post office so that everybody has a post office box. And he's like, well, where do you live? And I gave him the address, and he says, oh, I can see your house on Google Earth.
Yeah, we tell people that all the time.
Yeah.
And
I'm like, yes, the one with the big
easy.
red roof and the one with the gray roof is my studio. So he could see the whole thing laid out on Google Earth, and he's like, yeah, this is no problem. So he got me a debit card. All I wanted was a debit card that will allow me to access the money that I had in the institution, because we use it for certain kinds of credit card processing, that when I was on the road, I could maybe pay with gas or pay for a hotel with it. Wasn't asking for any credit. And I used it for a couple of years, and then I went to use it, and it didn't work. And it had not expired.
so we went right back to square one.
And I called, and I get some frickin' woman in the Philippines who thinks that all of the United States is paved with gold and has home delivery, and I can't talk. She knows nothing about any part of the United States, and I just finally gave up, and I said, I used to leave money in that account, and I would use it I would save it, actually. And then sometimes if we were going out someplace special for an anniversary or something like that, I would use it for an extra special meal. Kind of almost as a savings account. You weren't getting any interest on it. I don't leave anything in there now. I just spend it right away on something. And, I could do that. That's no problem. But it was just like, I could transfer it with Zelle or one of the other services for no extra fees. But it's just like, it was like, really? What do you mean I can't have? Well, you don't have home mail delivery. That makes me a fraud because I have no home mail delivery. All of this part of northern Arizona has no home mail delivery. I mean, everybody in this area, that's about 3,500 people. I don't know if I don't think Seligman has home mail delivery. So that's another, they're bigger than we are. They're like 10,000 maybe?
No, I don't think that big.
6,000?
Big.
Something. Anyway, a couple thousand people. I'll bet Peach Springs doesn't. I'll bet, all these other smaller towns. Williams does have home mail delivery.
For part of Williams.
For part of Williams, at least, because I've seen the mailman running around. But at least the downtown area. But the fact is, I remember having to argue with people to get stuff delivered to town. Now, a lot of the companies have improved their systems. If the company you're trying to do business with relies on the U.S. Postal Service to check the address, they will think the address is a fraud, because there is no such thing as 93 Lewis. Because it's a building. It's an address assigned by the county.
It's a business.
It's a business that's open from like 6 to 10 or something like that. And it used to be open 24 hours a day. But it has no mail delivery. Now UPS, FedEx, DHL, everybody else goes there. But the post office doesn't go there because there is no mail delivery in town. And most of the time, you can now have an override in the online ordering systems that will say, no, this is the address I want you to ship it to. I don't care what your stupid system says. But there have been times when I have had to call customer service and explain to them. And I remember talking to one of the ladies with my black boots that I wear for work sometimes. I'd gotten the original ones in a store when I was visiting my daughter Mumble years ago. Wore them out. Just totally wore them out. And I decided to get another pair that were the same model, just one half size up because I like to wear thicker socks in those. And could not order online to save my soul. Called the woman, explained what had happened, and she's like, I got to talk to our people. She said, this is the third time this week that I have had somebody who could not ship without customer assistance. So now when you go into their system, there's an override that says, no, that's really the address, no matter what anybody says. But it's something you don't ever think about.
Yeah, living off grid doesn't necessarily mean you don't get mail delivery. A lot of places in rural America
They'll have rural routes.
will have rural routes.
Yes.
But a lot of that goes back to the rural electrification process.
Right.
Probably close to 100 years ago.
Right.
That program is gone.
Uh-huh.
And they're not doing any new infrastructure like that. So if you live in an area where it's really rural,
Yeah.
and there's probably not going to be any mail delivery. And that means that all of these systems that rely on your physical address and more importantly rely on the postal service to verify your address just won't work.
Right. Well, I know I got an order from somebody on Etsy the other day, and it said that Etsy has installed an override in their system too, because the postal service must say something. Sometimes they don't like the way somebody types in their address. They say 52 this, that, the other thing street, apartment B, and they want you to call it something else, you know. But that's the way the local people call it, and the post office there knows about it. And if you call it something else, you may have trouble delivering. So I noticed that Etsy now has an override, and that's a pretty big deal, you know, for them to bother overriding something.
Well, I want to say one last thing about the U.S. Postal Service. I can't say that. So I'm going to say something different. In case you haven't really noticed, the U.S. Postal Service has been changing how they move mail through the system. We live in rural Arizona. It used to be that we had 2 mail trucks a day. One in the morning that brought the mail to us that was coming in to be delivered, and then one that left town at 3:30 in the afternoon that was taking all the mail out of Ash Fork to go down to the regional sort facility. Well, the regional sort facility was relatively close. The Postal Service has gone to a hub and spoke system. Much of the country is on a spoke. And one of the things I found out today is that the system still thinks that my mail, when I took it in today and dropped it off, it thinks it went out at 3:30 today. The truth of the matter is it's not going to go out until tomorrow morning.
Right, because they've eliminated the afternoon pickup.
So now what happens is instead of being a 2 or 3 day priority delivery, you're looking at least 4 or 5 days for priority.
Because like if somebody says, like one of my jewelry suppliers will say, well, do you want to send it here or do you want to send it there? And I'm like, send it UPS ground. It'll get to me in 2 days, and you're wasting your money and my money, depending on who's paying for it, because sometimes I do get free shipping. To send it anything faster, it'll actually take longer because it has to go down to Phoenix anyway and then come back up.
Yeah, so it's really bizarre. They used to sort mail here in Ash Fork for local delivery. Now everything goes to Phoenix.
Well, you can still have the local slot for actual stuff in the post office.
But it doesn't get sorted in Ash Fork. It goes down to Phoenix to be sorted in. Believe it or not. So it goes 160 miles from here on a truck, only to come back 160 miles.
Right.
Depends on how
so
fast
don't
they
be in
sort.
a hurry.
Anyway, there's a lot of things that happen when you live off-grid. Who would have thought that a company would not sell a product to you because you lived off-grid?
Right. See, you know, I understand their perspective in some ways.
I don't.
When I talked to them the first time around, I said, look, we live quite far out. We don't expect you to come out to our home and do a home visit. We will come to you. This is a very portable machine. This thing is smaller than my computer case by quite a lot. And I said, you know, we will come to you so that because they have to do a face mask fitting and all that kind of stuff. And they were like, oh, no problem, no problem. And I wouldn't ask somebody to come out here. I really wouldn't. Now, the therapist says that they actually have multiple customers out here. And we know that they do because we see them deliver oxygen every week. And I would not want to be on that kind of a delivery system out here because sometimes that road is impassable.
Yeah.
And that truck that they're driving is just a regular truck. It's not a four-wheel drive, you know, slip and slide truck.
So I hope that our recent experiences with off-grid and off-grid mail addresses at the post office gives you something to think about. There's a lot when you start thinking about going off-grid. If you live in suburbia and you decide, I'm going to go off-grid, fine. You have a power pole right out beside your house.
Some places
you choose not to connect. That's fine.
Or some places they'll make you connect. It's required by law, but then you can pay the minimum amount, which is usually very inexpensive. It's usually less than $20 a month, and then they have, you know, the ability to do different things depending on which system you're on. Some places you can feed your power when anything you're not using back into the system and make a pittance. They don't pay you fair value, but make a pittance back. Some places it's a better deal. You need to check out all the ins and outs of these things. We had a girlfriend down in Prescott Valley that was very happy. They quote unquote rent your roof. They put up the solar panels for free, and then that comes right off of your bill. And she went from having a big bill, which was hard for her because she was on a very limited income, to having
no bill.
No bill most of the time. So she was a happy camper. That meant she could run the AC as much as she needed to in the summer because it gets a lot hotter down there than it does up here. So, you really have to read the fine print on all of this stuff. It's just not things you would think of. I showed Henry a joke on Instagram today about, if you are standing butt naked out in the yard and nobody can see you, you're in a rural area. If you stand butt naked out in the yard and your neighbors call the police, you're in a suburban area. If you stand butt naked out in the yard and nobody pays any attention to you, you're in an urban area. And if you're streaking across the yard butt naked because you forgot to close the chicken coop door and it's getting to be nighttime, you are rural and you're a homesteader.
Well, I hope you found this of some interest and hopefully some use in your future.
Yeah, it's just knowing about it. I mean, we were pretty prepared in comparison to most people, and yet still...
There's things that surprise us.
There's stupid things that you're like, what? What do you mean? And I understand that they could be concerned that we could be... I mean, there's people out here, even in areas that have electricity, that basically took a shed and converted it to a house, which is not illegal, as long as you have certain amenities, and live in a tiny little thing that's basically a shed, like a she shed or something. And that's fine, but when you tell them, look, I'm staring at my computer screen, and I've got actually two computer screens because I've got a big one and a little one, and I've got a printer, and I can see the AC from here, and you couldn't do that on a crappy little system.
No.
And to me, I know what it is. They don't want somebody coming back and saying, I can't use this equipment because it takes too much power.
And then they have to come collect the equipment back, and then they don't get paid by the insurance company.
But you could, if you wanted to get technical about this, you could say, well, here are the electrical requirements. Nobody ever mentioned that. Nobody said, oh, there's this much of a draw. And Henry and I were talking about different kinds of medical equipment and what would take more power, like an oxygen concentrator.
Yeah.
Most of the people who live out here do not use oxygen concentrators because the machinery is a very high draw. And when he explained to me the physics behind it, because I never even thought about how one works, I totally understood why that would take a lot of power. But these little teeny tiny CPAPs and BiPAPs these days, super low power draw, they take less than 100-watt light bulb does.
Yeah.
And if you can't afford a 100-watt light bulb, you should probably rethink your electrical system.
Well, we're going to cut it off right now because I still have to go edit and get this prepared for tomorrow morning.
Yep.
As I promised.
Yep.
So
we've been busy today.
Don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and ring the bell for notifications because there's a lot more stuff coming, including I'll be taking you through what actually was the real problem with the Range Rover. It's finally fixed. So, we'll catch you on the next one.
Bye.
Bye. Hey, keep brainstorming.
Obviously we are.
My brain hurts.